Hey guys, tonight we slip into the flickering candlelight of a Renaissance monastery where the air hums with the rustle of vellum and the soft murmur of monks chanting illuminated manuscripts under a starry sky. Picture yourself tiptoeing through stone cloisters, the scent of wax and old ink curling around you as robed figures gather at midnight to read sacred texts glowing with gold. You're diving into a world where every word is a prayer, and one wrong verse could unsettle the divine order spoiler. You probably won't survive this maze of mystic pages without a few chills. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment with your city and local time. I'm curious where you're drifting off from tonight. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're in a European monastery around 1450, in a place like Monte Cassino, where monks hold midnight readings of illuminated manuscripts, ornate books filled with scripture psalms or saintly tales, their pages alive with gold and vibrant inks. These aren't just readings. They're rituals believed to align the monastery with God's will, their timing tied to the sacred hour of vigils. Why midnight? Because in Renaissance Christianity, the witching hour was a time of spiritual clarity, when prayers pierced the veil between earth and heaven. Imagine you're a monk, your quill trembling as you read a psalm by candlelight, knowing it's for the salvation of souls. One slip, and you're not just flubbing a line, you're risking divine displeasure. Historically, the Renaissance saw a revival of manuscript culture, with monasteries like those in Italy or France preserving knowledge through hand-copied books, their illuminations a blend of art and devotion. Midnight readings, part of the divine office, were central to monastic life. Here's the quirky bit. Some monks believed the candles listened their flames, flickering to approve sacred verses. Sounds wild, right? Like your lamp vibing to your playlist. Historians still argue whether this was spiritual belief or poetic ritual. Did candles really respond, or was it just monkish fancy? You pause by a cloister arch, the air cool with stone and wax catching a monk's low chant as he reads a gilded page. The manuscript's gold glimmers, its verses a psalm of David meant to guard the monastery's soul. You squint, but the text's meaning eludes you, designed for those who know the sacred rhythm. These readings weren't for everyone. Only trained monks, abbots, or visiting scholars could join their voices, a chorus of divine order. You smirk, thinking it's like cracking a secret playlist, tricky but holy. You step closer, the monk's candle casting shadows like dancing saints. He's not just reading, he's weaving prayer, his voice binding the night to God. You're starting to feel the weight of his craft, each word a whisper of faith. Ever time a moment just right. That's the monk's game played in the monastery's midnight glow. But the real magic unfolds in their scriptoriums, where these manuscripts come alive, and you're about to slip into their inky sacred world. You're weaving through the shadowed cloisters of a Renaissance monastery, the pre-dawn air cool with the scent of damp stone and the faint tang of melted wax from flickering candles. The silence hums with the soft rustle of monks' robes and the distant toll of a bell, but you're still chasing those midnight readings of illuminated manuscripts, their chanted psalms echoing divine order. Remember, that monk reading a gilded psalm by candlelight. His sacred words were born in the scriptorium, the monastery's heart of ink and prayer. Now you're exploring these hallowed workspaces where manuscripts were crafted and read, and trust me, it's cozier than a library nook, but twice as intense. Picture yourself ducking into a scriptorium, its oak tables cluttered with quills, ink pots, and vellum sheets. The air thick with the musty scent of parchment and the soft glow of oil lamps. Monks hunch over manuscripts, their fingers stained with ochre and indigo as one chants a passage from a glowing book of hours, its gold illuminations dancing in the light. These aren't just writing rooms. They're sacred spaces blessed by abbots to honor God and preserve His Word. The manuscript psalms, gospels, or saintly lives are read here at midnight. Their verses a ritual to align the monastery with heaven's rhythm. Historically, by 1450, scriptoriums in monasteries like Cluny were hubs of Renaissance learning, producing ornate books that blended art, scripture, and devotion. You're watching a monk pause, his voice steady as he reads a verse of Saint Benedict, ensuring its cadence matches the vigil's holy hour. Here's the quirky bit. Some monks believed their ink pots whispered divine corrections, nudging quills to perfect a verse's flow. Imagine your pen muttering editing tips. Sounds like a scribe's daydream. Right. Historians still argue whether this was spiritual belief or a focusing ritual. Did ink really whisper, or were monks just deep in their craft? You step closer, the scriptorium's chill prickling your skin. The monk's verse, a prayer for humility, is framed by a miniature of angels, its gold leaf catching the lamp's glow. These readings are precise, their timing tied to the divine office, ensuring every psalm resonates with God's will. You're struck by the reverence, how a quill's scratch or a voice's lilt becomes a prayer. It's like syncing your work to a sacred playlist, but for saving souls. You smirk, thinking of your own late-night focus, ever nail a task in the quiet hours. That's the monk's vibe etched in vellum. You notice a novice nearby, grinding pigments for ink, his eyes darting to the master's manuscript, eager but years from chanting sacred texts. The scriptorium's hierarchy is strict masters read the holiest verses, novices copy, or clean earning trust through toil. A misread word could disrupt the ritual, weakening the monastery's divine shield or offending the abbot. You wince imagining the novice's nerves. It's like flubbing a group presentation, but with your salvation on the line. You chuckle, picturing him double-checking his ink like you'd proofread a risky email, desperate to stay in the game. The scriptorium feels alive, a brotherhood where every stroke and chant binds them to God's word. You glance at a half-finished manuscript, its psalm adorned with ivy borders, the vellum soft as a whisper. The monk's skill is eerie, blending calligraphy and illumination into divine art. Their readings, a performance only the initiated hear. These scriptoriums aren't just workspaces, they're altars where words become prayers under midnight's veil. You're hooked, feeling the pulse of their world, but the reading's spiritual power runs deeper, tying manuscripts to God's eternal light, and you're about to see how faith shaped every chanted verse under the monastery's starry roof. As you slip out, the cloister's rhythm, bell tolls, rustling robes, feels like a sacred heartbeat. You're starting to grasp the monk's world, their scriptoriums, not just dens of ink, but cradles of divine prayer. Those midnight readings are their legacy, but their spiritual roots make them glow, and you're itching to unravel their holy thread. You're drifting through the pre-dawn chill of a Renaissance monastery's cloisters, the air heavy with the scent of old vellum and the faint smoke of beeswax candles flickering in niches. The silence pulses with the soft tread of monks' sandals and the distant chime of a vigil's bell, but you're still chasing those midnight readings of illuminated manuscripts, their chanted psalms weaving divine order in the scriptorium. Remember that monk pausing over a gilded book of hours, his voice a prayer. His sacred craft was born in that inky hub, but its soul lies in faith. Now you're diving into how spirituality shaped these midnight reading rituals, and trust me, it's deeper than a cathedral's crypt. Picture yourself tucked into a scriptorium corner, the oak beams creaking as a monk reads a psalm from a manuscript, its gold illuminations glowing like stars. The reading isn't just a task, it's a spiritual act believed to draw God's grace, aligning the monastery with heaven's rhythm during the sacred hour of vigils. In Renaissance Christianity, midnight was a liminal time when prayers pierced the veil to commune with the divine, warding off sin and darkness. The manuscripts, psalms, gospels, or lives of saints were holy vessels, their words infused with spiritual power when chanted aloud. Historically, by 1450, monastic orders like the Benedictines saw the divine office, including vigils, as a daily renewal of their covenant with God, with readings central to this devotion. You're watching the monk's breath mist in the chill, his voice steady, as he chants a verse of St. Augustine invoking divine protection for the sleeping world. Here's the quirky bit. Some monks believed their manuscripts hummed during readings, vibrating with the Holy Spirit's presence. Imagine your book buzzing like a sacred phone. Sounds like a monk's mystic vibe, right? Historians still argue whether this was spiritual belief or poetic exaggeration. Did manuscripts really hum? Or were monks just lost in prayer? You lean closer, the scriptorium's lamplight casting shadows like dancing saints. The psalm, a plea for mercy, isn't just words. It's a prayer, its cadence believed to shield the monastery from evil. These rituals are steeped in faith, tying readings to cosmic harmony with each verse, a step closer to God's light. You're struck by the intimacy, how a monk's voice becomes a conduit channeling divine will through vellum. It's like singing a hymn that's also a lifeline, but for eternal stakes. You smirk, thinking of your own quiet moments. Ever feel a song lift your soul? These monks weave that lift into every chant. You notice a senior monk nearby, his rosary clicking as he oversees the reading, ensuring the psalm's rhythm honors the Virgin Mary. His presence is vital. A misread verse could disrupt the ritual, weakening the monastery's spiritual armor or offending God's ear. You wince, imagining the reader's stress. It's like flubbing a sacred TikTok, but with your salvation at stake. You chuckle, picturing the monk double-checking his intonation like you'd proofread a risky text. The spiritual stakes are sky high. A flawed chant might invite sin, dimming the scriptorium's holy glow. You run your fingers along a manuscript's edge, its ivy border soft under your touch, the vellum whispering like a prayer. The psalms are subtle, meant for those who know monks trained to chant God's word, abbots decoding divine cues. The monk's faith isn't just belief, it's discipline, their voices guided by rosary prayers and fasting to keep the ritual's power strong. As you're hooked, seeing how spirituality shapes every note, turning readings into sacred performances. You recall that scriptorium's inky hum, its quills scratching to God's rhythm. These rituals aren't just chanted, they're guarded by guilds, sacred brotherhoods who keep their secrets tight. And you're about to meet the monks who weave this divine web under the monastery's starry roof. As you linger, the cloister's rhythm bell tolls, rustling robes feels like a holy pulse. You're starting to grasp the monks' world, their spiritual rituals, not just readings, but pacts with God and the Virgin. Those chanted psalms are their legacy, but the guilds that guard them are the scriptorium's heartbeat, and you're itching to step into their sacred circle. You're tiptoeing through the candlelit cloisters of a Renaissance monastery, the pre-dawn air, heavy with the scent of damp stone and the faint crackle of wax dripping from sconces. The silence hums with the soft murmur of monks' prayers and the distant toll of a vigil's bell, but you're still chasing those midnight readings of illuminated manuscripts, their chanted psalms weaving divine order in the scriptorium. Remember that monk chanting a plea for mercy, his voice a divine conduit. His faith shaped the ritual, but he didn't read alone. Now you're uncovering the secret guilds of monks who guarded these reading practices, and it's tighter than a manuscript's vellum binding. Picture yourself slipping into a shadowed chapter house, its stone walls etched with saints, the air thick with the tang of ink and myrrh smoke. Monks gather in a circle, their robes brushing the floor, as a senior brother chants a verse from a gilded book of psalms, his voice low to share a reading's sacred rhythm. These aren't just readers, they're a guild, a secretive brotherhood bound by oaths to protect the rituals of midnight readings. In Renaissance monasteries, such guilds, often tied to the scriptorium or choir, held the keys to chanting illuminated texts, ensuring their psalms or gospels aligned with God's will. Historically, by 1450, orders like the Cistercians relied on these groups to preserve the divine office's purity, their readings a sacred art passed through generations. You're watching a master monk correct a novice's intonation of a St. Jerome passage, his tone sharp, ensuring the vigil's cadence stays true. Here's the quirky bit. Some guilds used wax-sealed tokens like tiny crosses to mark members, believing they carried the Virgin's blessing. Imagine flashing a candle wax badge like a secret club pass. Sounds like a monk's mystique, right? Historians still argue whether these tokens were practical or ceremonial. Did they just mark loyalty or hold divine favor? You edge closer, the chapter house's chill seeping into your bones. The Master's Psalm, a call for divine light, is framed by gold illuminations, its rhythm meant to guard the monastery's soul. The guild's rules are strict. Masters lead the readings, novices copy texts or light candles, and no outsider learns the chant's sacred timing. Betraying the guild like sharing a psalm's cadence with a rival monastery could mean exile, your name struck from the order's prayers. You wince, imagining the shame. It's like getting kicked out of a group chat for leaking secrets, but with your salvation shunned. You smirk, picturing the novice double-checking his chant like you'd proofread a risky post. Ever hide a secret too big to spill. That's their life bound in vellum. You notice the guild's unity, their voices blending like a choir, each monk a thread in a sacred tapestry. Their readings are the monastery's pulse, linking prayers to God's eternal rhythm, ensuring every verse is a shield against sin. But secrecy breeds tension. A rival guild in a nearby abbey might covet your gospel's chant, stealing its cadence to claim your patron's favor. You're struck by their vigilance, how they guard their craft like a reliquary. It's like protecting your startup's code, but with heavenly stakes. You chuckle, thinking of a monk eyeballing a rival's manuscript like you'd side-eye a competitor's project. The chapter house feels alive, a brotherhood where every chant binds them to God and the Virgin. You glance at a manuscript on a lectern, its borders swirling with angels, a nod to the guild's sacred chants. Their skill is eerie, weaving psalms with such precision they seem to summon divine light. Their readings, a language only they speak. They're not just monks, they're keepers of the monastery's soul, their chants threading holy power through the night. You're hooked, feeling their pride, but the abbot's shadow looms his eyes, watching every verse. You recall that psalm's divine glow, its spiritual rhythm, tied to the Holy Spirit. The abbot's oversight is next shaping these cryptic chants, and you're itching to see how his will binds the guilds under the monastery's starry roof. As you slip out the cloister's rhythm, bell tolls, rustling robes, feels like a sacred heartbeat. You're starting to grasp the monk's world, their guilds not just choirs, but holy circles, guarding the scriptorium's secrets. Those midnight readings are their legacy, but the abbot's grip is firm, and you're ready to step into his watchful domain. You're gliding through the pre-dawn stillness of a Renaissance monastery's cloisters, the air cool with the scent of stone and the faint glow of candles casting shadows like silent saints. The quiet hums with the soft shuffle of monks' sandals and the distant echo of a vigil's bell, but you're still chasing those midnight readings of illuminated manuscripts, their chanted psalms weaving divine light in the chapter house. Remember that master monk correcting a novice's St. Jerome verse. His guild guarded the sacred chants, but they read under a heavier gaze, the abbot's. Now you're diving into how abbots controlled these midnight reading rituals, and trust me, it's stricter than a scribe's quill on vellum. Picture yourself skirting the edge of the abbot's study, its oak door carved with crosses, as a monk hurries past clutching a gilded book of hours, his steps quickening toward a private audience. These readings aren't just prayers. They're monastic mandates. They're psalms, calls for mercy, praises for God, chanted at midnight to align the monastery with divine will, all under the abbot's command. Historically, by 1450, abbots in orders like the Benedictines held absolute authority, overseeing the divine office to ensure spiritual and temporal order, with midnight vigils a key ritual. The manuscript's verses from Gospels to saintly lives were chosen to reflect the abbot's vision of piety. You're watching a monk present his reading schedule to the abbot, his voice low, hands trembling, knowing a flawed chant could mark him disloyal. Here's the quirky bit. Some monks believed the abbot's blessing charged their manuscripts, making verses stronger if he touched the vellum first. Imagine your boss's handshake juicing up your book. Sounds like a holy power trip, right? Historians still argue whether this was devotion or monastic flattery. Did the abbot's touch really empower, or were monks currying favor? You step closer, the study's warmth radiating from its brazier. The monk's psalm, a plea for divine guidance, is meant to unify the monastery's prayers, its cadence approved to honor the Virgin Mary. The abbot's oversight is relentless. Guilds submit reading plans to his scrutiny, ensuring every verse aligns with the liturgical calendar or the monastery's patron saint. A chant too bold, like a gospel passage, hinting at reform without approval, could be deemed heretical, risking censure or exile. You wince imagining the monk's dread. It's like pitching a risky idea to a CEO knowing they're watching, except here it's God's wrath via the abbot. You smirk, picturing the monk double-checking his psalm like you'd proofread a high-stakes email. You notice a novice lingering outside his rosary, clicking nervously. Aware the abbot's spies, senior monks, or lay brothers watch the scriptorium for defiance. A misread verse could disrupt the divine office, weakening the monastery's spiritual shield, or offending a visiting bishop. Monks counter with subtlety, chanting only approved texts, their true devotion veiled in guild secrecy. You're struck by their cunning, how they weave loyalty into vellum while dodging the abbot's gaze. It's like slipping a personal note into a work report, but with quills and heavenly stakes. You chuckle, thinking of a monk hiding a fervent prayer like you'd bury a quip in a serious text. Ever keep a secret from a nosy boss? That's their daily grind, etched in candlelit chants. You glance at a cloister window, its stained glass glowing with a saint's halo, a nod to the manuscript's sacred verses. The abbot's grip ensures these readings serve his monastery soul's saved order, maintain patrons pleased. But it's a tightrope. Guilds must please the abbot while guarding their hoacha, their chants a dance of duty and devotion. You're hooked, feeling the monk's tension, their readings not just prayers, but monastic scripts. You recall that guild's chapter house, their voices syncing to the Virgin's rhythm. Those psalms hold deeper meanings, divine codes beyond the abbot's rule, and you're about to unravel what these cryptic verses truly whisper under the monastery's starry roof. As you slip past the study, the cloister's rhythm bell tolls, rustling robes, feels like a holy heartbeat. You're starting to grasp the monk's world, their guilds bound to the abbot's will, their chanted manuscripts, his voice in the scriptorium. Those sacred verses are the monastery's secrets, but their divine meanings run deeper, and you're itching to decode their celestial tales. You're skulking through the shadowed corners of a Renaissance monastery's cloisters, the pre-dawn air heavy with the scent of cooling wax and the faint creak of ancient oak under monks' sandals. The silence pulses with the soft toll of a vigil's bell and the murmur of distant prayers. But you're still chasing those midnight readings of illuminated manuscripts, their psalms binding the night to God under the abbot's watchful gaze. Remember that monk presenting his reading schedule to the abbot, his voice trembling. Those chants were his mandate, but their power lies in deeper secrets. Now, you're unraveling the hidden meanings encoded in these illuminated texts, and trust me, it's trickier than deciphering a cipher in candlelight. Picture yourself huddled in a scriptorium alcove, the lamplight flickering over a gilded book of hours, its vellum pages alive with swirling vines and gold-leafed saints. A monk chants a psalm, his voice a low hum, but the text's not just scripture, it's a cipher weaving layers of divine wisdom, allegorical truths, or even coded messages for the initiated. A verse praising the Virgin might hint at a patron's virtues, a gospel's parable, veil a warning against heresy. In Renaissance, monasteries' manuscripts were more than prayers. They were spiritual maps, their illuminations and words holding secrets for monks, abbots, or visiting scholars. Historically, by 1450, illuminated texts often carried allegorical or political undertones, with patrons like the Medici commissioning works that blended devotion with subtle agendas. You're squinting at a psalm's border, its ivy hiding a tiny cross that might signal a donor's plea, but only if you know the sacred key. Here's the quirky bit. Some monks believed certain illuminations spoke in dreams, revealing hidden meanings to those pure of heart. Imagine your book DMing you. Divine spoilers sounds like a scribe's fever dream, right? Historians still argue whether this was mystical belief or meditative focus. Did illuminations really speak, or were monks interpreting their own faith? You lean closer, the vellum's scent grounding you as the monk's psalm unfolds. The verse, a call for mercy, seems simple, but its gold-framed miniature, a dove over a throne, might praise a local bishop's peace efforts, a code for the abbot's allies. You're struck by the layer's spiritual meanings, like divine grace for monks. Keep prayers pure, while allegorical ones like patronage or warnings bind the monastery to its worldly ties. It's like hiding a memo in a hymn, but for eternal stakes. You smirk, thinking of your own coded messages. Ever slip a jab into a polite text? That's the monk's heart etched in ink and gold. You notice a novice nearby, his quill scratching notes, catching the psalm's surface, but missing its code, his mind on prayer, not politics. The manuscript's meanings are subtle. Their illuminations, doves, vines, or crowns woven with symbols only the initiated decode, like a guild's nod or an abbot's phrase. But they're fragile. A misread verse could misalign a ritual offending God or expose a patron's secret, risking the monastery's favor. You wince imagining the monk's stress. It's like sending a coded email praying it's not misread, except here it's a bishop's wrath at stake. You chuckle, picturing the monk double-checking his chant like you'd triple-check a risky post. The meanings are a dance of faith and power, each word a whisper only the monastery's elite can hear. You step back, the scriptorium's glow framing the manuscript like a starry scroll. The texts are layered, spiritual for monks, allegorical for abbots, political for patrons. You recall that guild's chapter house, their voices sinking to the Virgin's rhythm. These manuscripts aren't just earthly, they're cosmic, tied to the stars guiding the monastery's calendar. And you're about to grasp how celestial alignments shape these cryptic chants under the cloister's sacred roof. The abbot's oversight kept them grounded, but the heavens gave them flight, and you're itching to trace that starry thread. As you linger, the cloister's rhythm, bell tolls, rustling robes, feels like a coded pulse. You're starting to grasp the monk's world, their manuscripts not just prayers, but divine ciphers tying chants to heaven's light. Those hidden meanings are the monastery's soul, but their starry roots run deeper, and you're ready to explore their celestial weave. You're perched in the hushed gloom of a Renaissance monastery's scriptorium. The pre-dawn air cool with the scent of old parchment, and the faint flicker of oil lamps casting shadows like silent prayers. The quiet hums with the soft chant of a monk's psalm and the distant toll of a vigil's bell, but you're still chasing those midnight readings of illuminated manuscripts, their gilded verses hiding coded meanings in the scriptorium's glow. Remember that monk chanting a dove-framed psalm hinting at a bishop's peace. Those texts were divine ciphers, but their timing wasn't random, it was celestial. Now you're grasping how cosmic alignments guided these midnight reading rituals, and trust me, it's more dazzling than a comet over a cloister's spire. Picture yourself in a monastery's tower, its narrow window open to a sky ablaze with constellations, the monk's manuscript glinting below its gold illuminations, mirroring the stars' dance. For Renaissance monks, the heavens were God's clock, with stars like Orion, or the Pleiades marking liturgical seasons' feasts, or sacred hours like vigils. Midnight readings timed to align with celestial events were believed to amplify their spiritual power, drawing divine favor when planets like Venus rose or the moon waxed full. A psalm's chant might sync with a solstice, a gospel with Easter's lunar cycle. Historically, by 1450, monasteries like those in Florence used basic astronomy to set the divine office, ensuring rituals followed God's cosmic order. You're watching a monk adjust his reading to a star chart, his voice rising as Sirius climbs, chanting a verse of St. John to honor a feast. Here's the quirky bit: some monks believed starlight blessed their manuscripts, making verses glow brighter if read under a full moon. Imagine your book shining like a cosmic Kindle. Sounds like a monk's starry fantasy, right? Historians still argue whether this was spiritual belief or symbolic ritual. Did stars really bless texts, or were monks tying faith to nature's rhythm? You step closer, the scriptorium's chill tingling your skin. The monk's verse, a call for salvation, aligns with Venus's dawn rise, a celestial cue for a Lenten reading believed to deepen its grace. These cosmic chants aren't random, they're precise, tying the monastery to God's eternal calendar, ensuring psalms resonate with the heavens. You're struck by the genius, how a quill's stroke or a voice's lilt syncs with a solstice's arc. It's like timing your playlist to a sunrise but for divine stakes. You smirk, thinking of your own stargazing moments. Ever feel the night skies pull? These monks chant that pull into every sacred word. You notice a senior monk nearby, his astrolabe glinting as he confirms the star chart's alignment with the Pleiades climb. His role ensures the reading's truth. A mistimed psalm could disrupt the divine office, offending God or misaligning a feast. You wince, imagining the chanter's nerves. It's like misreading a cosmic Google calendar, but with eternal consequences. You chuckle, picturing the monk squinting at Sirius like you'd check an app for a meeting. The readings are more than prayers. They're celestial clocks guiding the monastery's spiritual life, fasting, feasting, worshiping. You run your fingers along a manuscript's border, its gold vine curling like a constellation, a nod to the starry cues shaping the chant. The psalm's meanings are layered, spiritual for monks, cosmic for the heavens' rhythm. You're hooked, seeing the scriptorium as a starry stage, each verse a hymn to God's sky. You recall that guild's chapter house, their voices blend into the Virgin's grace. These chants don't sing themselves. The tools, humble yet sacred, are the monks' hands, and you're about to examine how they worked these star-guided rituals under the cloister's sacred roof. The abbot's oversight kept them grounded, but the stars gave them wings, and you're itching to grip that holy craft. As you linger, the cloister's rhythm, bell tolls, rustling robes, feels like a starry pulse. You're starting to grasp the monks' world, their readings not just chants, but celestial hymns tying manuscripts to heaven's light. Those cosmic verses are the monastery's soul, but the tools that shape them are its heartbeat, and you're ready to explore their divine power. You're nestled in the flickering gloom of a Renaissance monastery scriptorium, the pre-dawn air heavy with the scent of inky vellum and the soft crackle of beeswax candles. The silence hums with the low chant of a monk's psalm and the distant toll of a vigil's bell. But you're still chasing those midnight readings of illuminated manuscripts, their starry-aligned verses pulsing with divine power. Remember that monk syncing a St. John verse with Sirius's rise. His cosmic chants were a celestial dance, but they relied on tools as sacred as the vellum itself. Now, you're examining the instruments used in these star-guided reading rituals, and trust me, it's earthier than a quill scratch on a starry night. Picture yourself crouching by a scriptorium desk, its oak surface cluttered with quills, horn inkwells, and brass candlesticks, their flames glinting like tiny constellations. Monks wield these tools with reverence, their hands stained with indigo as they turn manuscript pages or adjust candles to read gilded psalms. These aren't just props, they're tapu blessed with prayers to carry the Virgin's grace during vigils. The quill points to verses, the candlestick lights illuminations, and a small astrolabe aligns readings with the stars. Historically, by 1450 monasteries like those in Siena used such tools to perform the divine office, their precision ensuring chants matched celestial cycles like the moon's phases. You're watching a monk adjust a candlestick's flame, his voice steady, as he chants a psalm under Venus's dawn glow, its rhythm tied to a Lenten rite. Here's the quirky bit. Some monks believe their candlesticks danced when blessed, their flames swaying to approve a verse's cadence. Imagine your candle grooving like a holy spotlight. Sounds like a monk's mystic vibe, right? Historians still argue whether this was spiritual belief or ritual focus. Did flames really dance, or were monks lost in devotion? You lean closer, the scriptorium's chill prickling your skin. The monk's quill, a sharpened goose feather, traces a gospel passage, its strokes precise to honor the manuscript's sanctity, while the candlestick's light reveals a gold-leafed saint. A brass astrolabe, rare and polished, measures the Pleiades' rise, ensuring the reading aligns with a feast's starry cue. You're struck by the simplicity, how these humble tools weave cosmic prayers into vellum. It's like reading a sacred PDF by flashlight, but for divine stakes. You smirk, thinking of your own favorite tools. Ever treat a pen like it's magic? These monks cradle their quills like holy relics. You notice a novice nearby polishing a candlestick, his hands raw from wax burns, eager, but years from leading a reading. Tools are sacred, handled only by guild members, blessed with chants to the Virgin to keep their grace strong. Novices earn the right through copying texts, or tending lamps, learning to chant only after proving devotion. A shaky quill or dim candle could disrupt the ritual, mistiming a psalm or dimming its waka. You wince, imagining the master's scowl. It's like botching a code commit but with God's judgment. You chuckle, picturing the novice polishing his candlestick like you'd baby your phone praying it doesn't fail. The tools demand care stored in velvet pouches blessed by abbots to preserve their sacred power. You glance at a manuscript, its vine border glowing under the candle's flicker, a prayer etched for a starry night. The monks pair each tool with purpose quills, for tracing candles, for illuminating astrolabes, for timing. Their skill turns brass into divine scripts, each chant a nod to the heavens. You're hooked, seeing these tools as more than objects. They're the guild's soul, channeling God's light into the scriptorium. You recall that starry tower, its Pleiades guiding a Lenten verse. But unity frays and rivalries among monks over these sacred chants simmer ready to flare, and you're about to witness the tensions brewing under the monastery's celestial roof. As you ease back the cloister's rhythm, bell tolls, rustling robes, feels like a starry pulse. You're starting to grasp the monk's world, their tools not just aiding chants, but weaving the Virgin's light into the manuscript secrets. Those starry readings are cosmic, but guild rivalries are all too human, and you're itching to see the sparks fly over their sacred verses. You're skulking through the shadowed cloisters of a Renaissance monastery, the pre-dawn air biting with the chill of stone and the faint scent of myrrh smoke drifting from a nearby chapel. The silence hums with the soft chant of a monk's psalm and the distant toll of a vigil's bell, but you're still chasing those midnight readings of illuminated manuscripts, their star-guided verses glowing with divine power in the scriptorium. Remember that monk, adjusting his candlestick to chant a Lenten verse under Venus's glow. His sacred tools wove celestial rhythms, but not all guilds chanted in harmony. Now you're witnessing the rivalries among monks over these reading secrets, and trust me, it's fiercer than a debate in a cathedral's nave. Picture yourself hiding behind a stone pillar in the chapter house, overhearing two monks from rival guilds clash like Vespers bells over a disputed psalm's cadence. One's from a scriptorium guild famed for its gospel chants, the other from a choir guild known for its saintly verses. Their reading psalms for mercy gospels for salvation are their pride. Each guild claiming their chants hold the purest divine grace. Historically, by 1450, Renaissance monasteries like those in Florence saw guilds compete for prestige, their readings securing patronage from nobles or bishops. A stolen cadence could let a rival claim your donor's favor, undermining your guild's spiritual mana. You're watching the choir monk accuse the other of mimicking a St. Augustine verse's rhythm, his voice sharp as a quill's nib. Here's the quirky bit. Some guilds swore stolen chants angered the Virgin Mary, dimming candles to curse thieves. Imagine a flickering flame snitching on a rival sounds like a monk's holy hex. Right? Historians still argue whether these tales were spiritual fears or competitive gossip. Did the Virgin really curse? Or were guilds just throwing shade? You edge closer, the pillars chill, seeping into your bones. The scriptorium monk snaps back, claiming his gospel chant is older, blessed by a bishop's prayer. These readings aren't just prayers, they're tapu tied to God and the monastery's soul. Stealing one risks divine wrath, but it also threatens a guild's livelihood. If a rival's psalm draws your patron's gold, your scriptorium starves. You wince, feeling the sting. It's like a competitor stealing your project's spotlight, but with your monastery's rep trashed. You smirk, picturing the monks glaring like you'd eye a co-worker snagging your idea in a meeting. The argument escalates until an abbot steps in, his voice cutting through like a candlestick's flame, warning of consequences. Feuds could spark donor bans, fracture alliances, or draw a bishop's ire if a disputed chant disrupts a feast. You recall that novice polishing his candlestick, his hands raw under scrutiny. Rivalries make that pressure brutal. Guilds guard their chants with paranoia, teaching cadences through secret hymns or coded gestures to foil thieves. A leaked gospel verse could let rivals claim a Lenten rite or weaken a monastery's grace. You're struck by the fragility, how one slip can unravel a guild's wacha. You chuckle, thinking it's like a family recipe fight, but with the Virgin's judgment on the line. You slip away, the chapter house's chill lingering. The guild's pride fuels their craft, but it breeds suspicion. A monk from a rival guild might linger, his smile hiding a thief's intent to steal a psalm's rhythm. The men chant on their voices steady, but you sense their watchfulness. These readings aren't just prayers, they're battlegrounds. Their cadences, a source of glory and strife. Ever deal with team drama over credit? That's the monk's world. Every note a test of loyalty. You recall that Lenten verse, its starry glow tied to Venus. But bishops wield deeper influence, shaping these chants' divine weave. And you're about to see how their sacred hands guided the scriptorium's readings under the monastery's starry roof. As you melt back into the cloister's rhythm, bell tolls rustling robes, you feel the monk's tension. Their chanted manuscripts are their heart, but rivalries cut deep, sparking feuds under God's gaze. Those sacred verses bind them to the heavens, but bishop's will binds them tighter, and you're itching to step into their holy domain. You're creeping through the pre-dawn hush of a Renaissance monastery's cloisters, the air heavy with the scent of damp stone and the faint glow of myrrh smoke curling from a chapel's censer. The silence stirs with the soft toll of a vigil's bell and the murmur of monks' prayers, but you're still chasing those midnight readings of illuminated manuscripts, their gospel verses pulsing with divine power under starry skies. Remember that guild feud over a stolen St. Augustine chant, hissing with Virgin Mary curses. Those sacred cadences were a battleground, but a deeper force shaped their rhythm: bishops. Now you're revealing how bishops influence these reading practices, and trust me, it's holier than a cathedral's vespers. Picture yourself standing in a chapter house, its stone arches carved with angels, as a bishop in a velvet robe inspects a monk's reading of a gilded book of psalms, his rosary clicking softly. His presence isn't just ceremonial, it's commanding his approval, ensuring the chants align with God's will and the Church's doctrine. In Renaissance Europe, bishops were spiritual overlords, bridging monasteries with Rome's authority. Their influence shaping the divine office's rituals like vigils. The manuscript psalms, prayers for mercy, praises for saints needed their blessing to carry divine grace, ensuring readings honored the liturgical calendar. Historically, by 1450, bishops in regions like Tuscany oversaw monastic practices, guiding readings to reflect church unity, or patron agendas like those of the Medici. You're watching the bishop nod, approving a psalm's cadence for Lent, his chant sealing its sacred power. Here's the quirky bit. Some monks believed a bishop's blessing made manuscripts glow in candlelight, amplifying their spiritual potency. Imagine your book shining like a holy app. Sounds like a cleric's trance, right? Historians still argue whether this was mystical belief or ritual drama. Did manuscripts really glow, or were bishops hyping their authority? You step closer, the chapter house is incense wrapping around you. The bishop's role is critical. His knowledge of Scripture ensures the psalm's rhythm aligns with a feast's starry timing, like Venus's rise. But his influence is a tight leash. A chant too bold, like a gospel, praising a reformer without sanction, could be deemed heretical, risking excommunication or a monastery's disgrace. You wince, imagining the monk's dread. It's like crafting a sacred post, hoping it doesn't flop with Rome, except here, it's a bishop's wrath. You smirk, picturing the monk tweaking his cadence like you'd edit a risky email. The bishop's power isn't just spiritual, it's political, their prayers and oversight shaping chants that keep the monastery's divine rhythm. You notice a monk hovering nearby, his hands clasped, awaiting the bishop's verdict. Bishops don't just bless, they dictate. A guild might choose a psalm for Easter, but the bishop decides its form, perhaps a dove-framed verse to echo peace. They demand offerings, candles, wine, or prayers before readings begin, ensuring God's favor. Skipping these risks, tainting the chant's grace, dooming its power. You're hooked, seeing bishops as co-authors their blessings, turning readings into sacred scripts. It's not just oversight. It's a holy partnership, blending monks' voices with church will. You chuckle, thinking of a monk nodding to a bishop, like you'd appease a picky client. Ever tweak a project for the boss? That's their vibe, but with God's gaze. You glance at the manuscript, its gold vine glinting a coded prayer for a bishop's eyes. The monks' chants, born in guild scriptoriums, gain their soul through these rites, tying them to the monastery's starry pulse. You recall that guild feud, their stolen gospel verse, threatening their manna. Bishops keep such tensions in check, ensuring chants serve the church, not guild pride. But mistakes happen. A misread psalm or skipped prayer could unravel the grace, and bishops are stern when chants stray. You're caught feeling the bishops sway their hands, steering the scriptorium's secrets under the monastery's starry glow. The monk's craft is theirs, but bishops' blessings make it holy. And you're about to face the fallout when these sacred verses falter. As you slip from the chapter house, the cloister's rhythm bell tolls, rustling robes feels like a sacred pulse. You're starting to grasp the bishop's world, their influence turning readings into hymns for God binding monks to heaven and Rome. Those coded chants are the monastery's prayer, but missteps cut deep, and you're itching to see what happens when a monk's voice strays. You're lurking in the shadowed hush of a Renaissance monastery's cloisters, the pre-dawn air thick with the scent of cooling wax, and the faint chime of a vigil's bell echoing through stone arches. The silence stirs with the soft rustle of monks' robes and a distant hymn, but you're still chasing those midnight readings of illuminated manuscripts, their psalm chants blessed by bishops for God's eternal rhythm. Remember that bishop approving a Lenten verse in the chapter house, his rosary sealing its grace. His sacred oversight kept the readings divine, but straying from them was a sin against the church and heaven. Now, you're facing the consequences for misusing these reading rituals. And trust me, it's graver than a quill snapping mid-psalm. Picture yourself huddled in a monastery's refectory, the morning light glinting off oak tables as a monk stands before an abbot, his head bowed, hands trembling under hemp cords binding his wrists. He's accused of misreading a gospel verse during vigils, chanting a reformer's tone that risked heretical whispers among the guild. In Renaissance monasteries, these readings were the cloisters' pulse, their psalms calls for mercy, praises for saints, encoding divine order guarded by guilds and bishops. A misstep could disrupt the divine office, weaken the monastery's spiritual shield, or offend a patron's ear. Historically, by 1450, monastic orders like the Dominicans enforced strict discipline with punishments like fasting, flogging, or exile for errors that threatened church unity or liturgy. You're watching the monk shrink the abbot's glare sharper than a scriptorium's quill. Here's the quirky bit. Some believed a misread chant could anger guardian angels, dimming the monastery's candles as a warning. Imagine your lights flickering to snitch on a flub sounds like a monk's holy hex rite. Historians still argue whether this was spiritual fear or monastic control. Did angels really dim candles, or were abbots hyping the stakes? You edge closer, the refectory's chill seeping into your bones. The abbot's voice booms, recounting the crime. The monk, swayed by a visiting scholar's reformist ideas, altered a St. Augustine verse's cadence, nearly sparking dissent. Punishment varies. Minor slips might mean extra prayers under scrutiny, but this error threatens the monastery's orthodoxy, demanding exile. He's banished to a remote hermitage, his guild mark struck from his quill, his name erased from the order's prayers. You wince, feeling the shame. It's like being canceled online, but with your whole cloister ghosting you forever. You smirk, picturing the monk sweating his mistake like you dodge a group chat expose, except here it's God's wrath via the bishop. You notice the guild's reaction. Monks turn away, their loyalty to the chants stronger than pity. A misread verse doesn't just doom the monk, it risks the monastery's grace-threatening patron funds or a bishop's favor. The abbot's verdict restores order, ensuring readings remain divine clocks. You're struck by the ripple effect, how one slip can shake the cloister prayers, falter patrons withdraw, angels turn away. You recall that novice polishing his candlestick, his hands raw under pressure. This is why errors aren't just mistakes. They're betrayals of the virgin God and the abbot. You chuckle thinking of a monk double-checking his psalm like you'd triple-check a risky email. You glance at the refectory's fresco, its saints haloed in gold, a nod to the manuscript's sacred verses. The monk's fate is a warning misuse a chant, and you unravel the cloister's divine web. Bishops' blessings and guild oaths guard these readings, but the abbot's spies lurk ready to pounce. You're hooked, feeling the monk's dread, their world balanced on a verse's cadence. You recall that guild feud over a stolen gospel chant, the tension thick with holy stakes. But chants travel some reading practices spread beyond monasteries. Through trade, their meanings shifting in new voices, and you're about to track how these sacred verses roamed Europe's pilgrim paths. As you slip from the refectory, the cloister's rhythm bell tolls, rustling robes feels heavy with judgment. You're starting to grasp the monk's burden, their chanted manuscripts not just prayers, but sacred pacts binding them to God and bishops. Those divine verses are the cloister's pulse, but missteps cut deep, and you're itching to follow their trail beyond the scriptorium's starry glow. You're weaving through the bustling dawn of a Renaissance monastery's outer courtyard, the air alive with the scent of fresh bread from the refectory and the faint tang of ink carried on a pilgrim's breeze. The cloister stirs with the clatter of wooden carts and the soft murmur of monks chanting matins, but you're still chasing those midnight readings of illuminated manuscripts, their gospel verses pulsing with divine grace under bishops' blessings. Remember that exiled monk banished for a heretical chant in the refectory. His misstep showed the reading's sacred weight, but their melodies weren't confined to the cloister they roamed far. Now you're tracking how these reading practices spread beyond monasteries through trade and pilgrimage, their meanings shifting in new voices. And trust me, it's wilder than a pilgrim's tale on the Camino. Picture yourself at a busy trade fair outside Florence, where monks from Monte Cassino barter vellum codices with merchants from Venice, their stalls piled with wax tablets and quills. A monk shares a psalm's cadence with a visiting scribe teaching its midnight rhythm to honor a saint's feast. These reading rituals, psalms, gospels, saintly lives traveled Europe's trade routes and pilgrim paths carried by monks, scholars, or lay brothers. Historically, by 1450, the Renaissance saw monasteries exchange manuscripts with secular scriptoria, spreading liturgical practices to cities like Venice or Bruges, where readings adapted to local saints or patrons. You're watching the monk guard his chant's core, sharing only its rhythm, not its full spiritual intent, meant for a Florentine chapel's liturgy. Here's the quirky bit. Some pilgrims claimed manuscripts hummed when carried to holy sites, guiding readings with divine luck. Imagine your book buzzing like a sacred GPS. Sounds like a traveler's tall tale, right? Historians still argue whether this was folklore or a devotional ploy. Did manuscripts really hum, or were monks hyping their trade? You step closer, the fair's dust swirling around you. The monk's psalm, a plea for mercy, is veiled in the Virgin's imagery, meant for a Venetian priest's chapel. Guilds controlled this spread, knowing a leaked chant could let outsiders mimic a Lenten rite or dilute the monastery's huaca. You're struck by the balance trade shared the reading's fame, but secrecy kept their power in the cloister. It's like posting a viral lyric, but hiding the chord's glory without spilling the source. You smirk, imagining the scribe puzzling over the cadence like it's a cryptic app glitch you'd rage quit. You notice a Bruges merchant, his eyes gleaming as he copies the psalm's rhythm, hoping to share it in his guild hall, but he misses its sacred timing. He's out of luck. The guild's chants, like their solstice psalms, are layered with spiritual metaphors, their meanings locked to outsiders. But trade blurred these lines. Pilgrimages to Rome or Santiago carried monks' readings to new chapels where they morphed into local rites. Saintly verses became civic prayers, gospels tied to merchant feasts. Monastic reforms like those of the Franciscans spread simplified chants to lay communities, blending them with secular poetry. You wince recalling the exiled monk's shame. Imagine his fear if his misread chant reached Venice, sparking heresy. You chuckle, picturing a monk dodging questions like you'd sidestep a nosy friend's probe. You wander past a caravan loading codices, its leader humming a gospel verse, a nod to the cloisters' sacred cues. The reading's reach was vast pilgrim routes carried them to Paris, where priests adapted psalms, or to Cologne, where scholars wove them into lectures. You're hooked, seeing the chant's legacy ripple beyond monasteries, their cadences a silent script of devotion. You recall that guild's chapter house, their quills guarding the virgin's secrets. But these readings left a deeper mark, inspiring Renaissance art beyond scriptorium. And you're about to trace how their sacred verses shaped the era's cultural canvas under the cloister's starry roof. As you melt back into the cloister's rhythm, bell tolls, cartwheels creaking, you feel the chant's journey. Their sacred verses, not just prayers, but threads in Europe's vast web. Those readings carried the monastery's voice far, but their legacy in art runs deeper, and you're itching to explore their broader stage. You're wandering through the golden haze of a Renaissance monastery's cloister, the midday sun warming the air with the scent of blooming lavender and the faint tang of fresh vellum from the scriptorium nearby. The courtyard pulses with the soft tread of monks' sandals and the distant hum of lauds, but you're still chasing those midnight readings of illuminated manuscripts, their gospel chants spreading sacred cadences along pilgrim paths. Remember that monk sharing a psalm's rhythm with a Venetian scribe at the trade fair? Those verses traveled far, but their deepest imprint lies in the monastery's heart, shaping Renaissance art. Now, you're tracing how these reading rituals inspired the era's cultural canvas, and trust me, it's more radiant than a fresco under cathedral light. Picture yourself stepping into a monastery's chapel, its stone walls glowing with frescoes of saints haloed in gold, their hands clutching manuscripts that echo the psalms chanted at vigils. These aren't just decorations, they're echoes, the monks' midnight readings woven into Renaissance paintings, tapestries, and altar panels. The chants motifs, doves for peace, vines for eternity, became symbols of divine grace, their coded meanings hidden in plain sight. Historically, by 1450, the Renaissance saw monasteries like those in Florence commission art reflecting liturgical practices, with patrons like the Medici funding works that mirrored manuscript illuminations. You're running your fingers along a fresco's vine border, its curve mimicking a psalm's gilded frame, feeling the monk's chants in every brushstroke. Here's the quirky bit. Some artists claimed their paint sang during Vespers, guided by chant spirits to mirror sacred verses. Imagine your canvas humming like a holy Spotify. Sounds like a painter's trance, right? Historians still argue whether this was spiritual inspiration or artistic flair. Did paints really sing? Or were artists riffing on the chant's mystique? You step closer, the chapel's air thick with incense and awe. A carved altarpiece nearby shows a saint reading a gospel, its gold leaf echoing a Lenten chant's illumination, while a tapestry weaves doves soaring over vines, a nod to a psalm's peace prayer. You're struck by the connection, how the monks' readings born in guild scriptoriums seeded Renaissance art, turning chants into cultural treasures. It's like a viral song spawning album art, but here it's a civilization soul in pigment and thread. You smirk, imagining your favorite lyric in a mural cool, but it's not guiding a liturgy. The chant's metaphor is layered with the Virgin's grace or God's light, inspired frescoes, reliquaries, even stained glass glowing with psalm motifs, each a subtle nod to the cloister's secrets. You wander to a cloister arcade where a stone relief depicts a monk chanting under stars, its rhythm echoing a solstice reading. The monks, steeped in guild secrecy, infuse their chants with divine manna, their cadences sparking art that resonated with abbots, bishops, and nobles alike. But it's bittersweet their names are lost, their guilds credited only in whispers. You recall that exiled monk, his misread gospel staining his legacy. His chants live in these frescoes, but he's a ghost in the paint. You chuckle, picturing him nodding at a tapestry's dove, anonymous but proud. Ever create something epic and get no credit. That's the monk's vibe, their art eternal, but their voices silent. You pause by a painted lectern, its angels clutching gilded books, a nod to the manuscript's sacred verses. The readings influence ripples through Florence's altarpieces, Sienna's tapestries, even Venetian glass etched with vine borders. You're hooked, seeing the chants as seeds, their spiritual and cosmic meanings sprouting across Renaissance culture. The monks' quills wove a radiant tapestry, their tools and prayers rooting it in the cloister's heart. You recall that starry tower, its Pleiades guiding a Lenten psalm. But the monks themselves, they live dual lives balancing sacred readings with monastic duties. And you're about to explore how they juggled their holy voices under the monastery's starry roof. As you drift back to the scriptorium's glow, the cloister's pulse monk's chants, rustling robes, feels like a painted hymn. You're starting to grasp the reading's reach, their midnight rituals, not just prayers, but sparks for art that binds the Renaissance. Those verses wove a cultural identity, but the monks' lives were the quill, and you're itching to uncover their dual roles in this sacred, inky world. You're slipping through the twilight hush of a Renaissance monastery's cloisters, the air soft with the scent of drying herbs and the faint clink of quills from the scriptorium's open windows. The courtyard glows with lantern light, its pulse of monks' vespers and rustling robes fading into the starry night. But you're still chasing those midnight readings of illuminated manuscripts, their psalm chants painting Florence's frescoes with divine grace. Remember that dove-woven tapestry in the chapel, echoing a peace prayer. Those sacred verses shaped a cultural tapestry, but the monks were more than chanters. Now, you're exploring their dual lives, balancing holy readings with monastic duties. And trust me, it's busier than a scriptorium at Complete. Picture yourself trailing a monk through the cloister's arches, his robe dusted with ink as he weaves past novices hauling water jugs. By night, he's a guild master chanting star-aligned psalms in the scriptorium, his voice syncing with Venus's rise to honor God's will. By day, he's a scribe, gardener, or almoner, copying manuscripts, tending cloister herbs, or distributing alms to pilgrims. In Renaissance monasteries, monks were spiritual and practical pillars, their high status from sacred readings tying them to duties like teaching or maintaining the abbey's lands. Historically, by 1450 orders, like the Carthusians, balanced the divine office with manual labor, ensuring monasteries like those in Siena thrived as self-sustaining communities. You're watching him pause to settle a dispute over grain shares, his voice calm but firm, like he's timing a gospel's cadence. Here's the quirky bit. Some monks use chant metaphors and disputes, likening tempers to off-key psalms, needing God's harmony. Imagine settling a fight with chant smooth like a Vesper's hymn sounds like a monk's quip. Right historians still argue whether this was leadership or cultural flair. Did monks mediate with chant wisdom? Or was it just Renaissance banter? You follow him to a herb garden where he inspects rosemary sprigs his scribe's ear, catching flaws like he'd hear a mist-time Quetzal trill. His dual life is relentless. Scriptoriums demand precision chanting, Lenten verses under bishop scrutiny, but the monastery pulls him into harvesting teaching or almsgiving. You're struck by the grind, how he balances divine melodies with earthly tasks. It's like juggling a job and family, except your job prays to the Virgin and your family runs a cloister. You smirk, thinking of your own multitasking chaos. Ever burn out on a deadline? That's his life with quills instead of keyboards. You notice him slip into the scriptorium, his hands adjusting a candlestick to teach a novice a psalm's rhythm. Even here, he's a mentor passing chant secrets while preparing vellum, but his mind's half on a council meeting about vineyard yields. The pressure's intense. A flubbed verse could mistime a feast, offending the abbot, while neglecting duties dims his manna, weakening his guild's grace. You wince, feeling the weight. It's like bombing a presentation while your team needs you, except here, it's divine harmony at stake. You chuckle, picturing him practicing his candlestick tilt, like you'd rehearse a big speech, hoping to nail both roles. You glance at his worn sandals, a sign of his humble vows despite his skill. He's no bishop, but his chants inspire Siena's altarpieces, binding the cloister to God's light. The guild fuels his pride, but the monastery grounds him. His dual life, a bridge between vellum and vineyard prayer and labor. You're hooked, seeing how his ink-stained hands weave both manuscripts and sanctity, a thread in the Renaissance glow. You recall that exiled monk, his misread gospel scarring his guild. Our monk here lives that fear balancing duty with devotion. You chuckle, imagining him dodging guild drama like you'd sidestep office gossip. His world is a tightrope, but time shifts, chance, and you're about to reflect on why these midnight rituals faded like stars at dawn. As you ease into the cloister's starry arches, the monastery's rhythm vespers, rustling herbs, feels like a living psalm. You're starting to grasp the monk's world, their dual lives stitching sacred readings to the cloister's heart. Those chanted verses were their mana, but eras change, and you're itching to explore why their melodies vanished under the monastery's starry roof. You're drifting through the quiet twilight of a Renaissance monastery's cloisters, the air soft with the scent of cooling stone and the faint hum of vespers fading into the starry haze. The courtyard's pulse slows, lanterns dim, monks' sandals whisper, but you're still chasing those midnight readings of illuminated manuscripts, their gospel chants weaving divine light into Siena's frescoes. Remember that monk juggling scriptorium and vineyard his candlestick steady, despite a life split between sacred verses and alms. His dual role bound the cloister's heart, but even the purest chants fade. Now, you're reflecting on why these midnight reading rituals vanished their divine melodies, dimming like stars at dawn. And trust me, it's as poignant as a vesper's bell's final toll. Picture yourself leaning against a cloister arch, its stone worn smooth by centuries, the once gilded manuscripts etched with psalms and saintly lives, now silent, their cadences lost to time. The scriptoriums are empty quills, still the guild's chants gone. Historically, by the late 15th century, the Renaissance shifted with the printing press's rise like Gutenberg's 1450s innovation, replacing hand-copied manuscripts with mass-produced books. Reformation upheavals and secularization, especially post-1500, disrupted monastic traditions, scattering monks and simplifying the divine office. The oral rituals of midnight readings, unrecorded in a culture-prizing performance, faded as guilds dissolved or patrons turned to printed texts. You're touching a cracked vellum page, its dove illumination, faint feeling the weight of a lost hymn. Here's the quirky bit. Some monks claimed the Virgin hid the chant, silencing their cadences to shield them from Protestant eyes. Imagine a goddess muting her own choir. Sounds like a divine vault, right? Historians still argue whether this was spiritual coping or deliberate secrecy. Did the Virgin guard the chants, or did progress erase them? You step into the starry courtyard, the cloister's silence heavy. The monks' secrecy, their strength, was their undoing. Chants taught through guild hymns and candlelit vigils relied on living voices. As printing presses flooded, Europe wars broke monasteries, and Reformation stripped rituals, the melodies frayed. Early printers like those in Venice noted manuscript beauty, but missed their midnight cadence, their meanings lost to outsiders. You wince imagining a monk's grief, his Lenten psalm half forgotten. It's like losing a family song mid-verse, except it's a cloister's soul. You recall that exiled monk, his misread gospel staining his guild, his fear of error, kept chants pure, but doomed them when monasteries fell. You glance at a chapel fresco, its saints fading a ghost of a peace prayer. The readings linger in fragments, altar panels, tapestry vines, stained glass doves, but their cadences dimmed, reduced to art by those who couldn't hear them. Bishops' blessings, guild oaths. The abbot's oversight, all faded under new faiths and presses, leaving verses that echo only in the cloister's stones. You smirk, thinking it's like a group chat dying when the vibe shifts, heartbreaking, but time rolls on. You chuckle softly, picturing a monk's ghost, sighing at a museum codex, its psalm clueless to its waka. The monastery feels still, its arches cradling the last starlight. The chant story of quills, gods, and guilds endures in their art, a silent hymn to Renaissance devotion. You're starting to feel their loss, a language chanted for eternity, yet lost to time, but also their strength, how they lit cloisters under starry roofs. Those monks, with their dual lives and sacred tools, wove more than manuscripts. They wove a world, its echo, lingering in every stroke. The cloister's glow softens the monastery's stones, blurring into the night, their vines and doves fading like whispers under a starry veil. You're standing by a quiet chapel, the air cool with ancient sanctity, the breeze humming through arched windows. The monks' chants bright with psalms and starlight, tied vellum to heaven, their quills singing the Virgin's will. Though their melodies dimmed, their spirit hums in the frescoes, in every gilded curve, catching moonlight. Let the cloister's hush cradle you the stars, a gentle guide. Close your eyes, feel the monastery's ancient embrace and drift into a dream where the midnight chants still sing. Good night.